Hi, this is National Master Dan Heisman, and we're going to continue with our series of YouTube videos to help you play chess better. I'm a glutton for punishment today. This is my third video, but I had a lesson canceled this afternoon, and I'm recovering from my hospitalization earlier in the week, so I can't go for long walks or anything yet. So I'm stuck here with you, and I thought what we would do is kind of make a companion to my last video. I just played a 50-minute game against, well, 45 game, but it took 50 minutes to make the video, against the mid-level computer Beth O here on the ICC. And I thought what we could do is go over the game with Stockfish 10, which is rated over twice what Beth O is rated, and see how embarrassing it can make it for me to tell me all the terrible things I did. And of course, when you play these complicated Naudorf games, it's going to be brutal. The computer's going to tear my play apart and tell me all the blunders I made and all the things I could have done better. But I'm going to try to learn something by that and show you how I'm going to learn it so that you can learn things too. So this is not strictly a video on how to analyze your game with computer. With that, we would just do it sort of theoretically and generically. This is more like a practical example of doing that. So I have not looked at this game at all. As I said, I know it's going to be brutal, but let's see what we can learn by doing it together. Now, I'm not too interested at the start of the game on what the computer thinks about my opening until I get out of the book. Because if I'm just playing book moves, I'm just choosing those moves. And if it doesn't like that book line that much, all right, that's fine. But that's not really what I'm trying to learn. I really want to know what's happening once I'm out of my book. Just to make you familiar with what's happening, I've moved the game board up a little bit so you can see the top 2 to 3 lines of analysis. Maybe I'll move it up an extra fraction of an inch here to get that third line in. Okay, so what you're seeing is the name of the computer here, Stockfish 10. 64 means it's the 64-bit version. 1 over here means it's the PV. It's the main line. It's the best move for both sides, but in his estimation. The 0.58 means he thinks that white is better in an opening position by about 0.58 pawns. And he thinks the optimum play for both sides goes something like this, which looks like a Queen's Gambit decline to me. In fact, it looks like a Queen's Gambit decline semi-Slav, which is interesting. The second best line he thinks is if white plays e4, in which case he thinks black should play e6, and now he's just switched that to e5. The computer likes, e4, e5 for black, and e4, e6 as the two best defenses for black. And the third best move it thinks for white behind e4, d4 is knight f3. All right, so having explained that, and it thinks the best move is 0.63 for white, the second best move is 0.45, the third best move is 0.45. So that's what you're going to be seeing as I play. You're going to be seeing Stockfish show me the top 3 lines, but I can't just use those lines. Sometimes you have to force it down those lines to have it explain what's going on, and we're going to be doing probably quite a bit of that. All right, let's get going with the game. I played e4, Stockfish played Sicilian, I played knight f3, Stockfish played d6, I played open Sicilian d4. Notice computer thinks that open Sicilian d4 is just about as good as anything. Right here it has the Moscow variation, bishop b5 check, as among the top 3. All right, so d4. Black pretty much has to take, although he can transpose with knight f6. Computer says taking is best. Knight takes. Excuse me. All right, so now the computer's number 1 move here is the very strange knight c6 when I could play c4, which is what the computer says I should play. And now it's saying knight f6, the main move, is number 1. Knight c3, a6 Naudorf. The computer, this is all interesting because I've seen this position my whole life, but the question is, what would the computer play? Excuse me. What would the computer play without any book here? And it's looking at the classical Sicilian knight c6, the Naudorf a6, and the dragon g6. All right, so a6. And what would it play against the Naudorf if it didn't know a book line? Right now, he's favoring the bishop e2 variation. He's also looking at the rare h3 variation and the even rarer g3 variation. So that's interesting because those are not certainly the most popular lines against the Nahdorf. Okay, so I play bishop g5. Computer says his best move is e6 with almost equality. I play f4. Computer says, I don't like that move that much. Now he's looking at the poison pawn line for black, queen to b6, which I thought the computer might play, but it didn't. Instead, it plays the rarer knight d7 line. I looked at bishop c4, but then I played queen f3. The computer says, good choice, Dan. You played queen f3. He plays queen c7, and I decided between castles and g4. Computer says, my move, castles, is best. And now he transposes. Oh, no, that's right. He doesn't transpose. He plays b5. So I looked at e5, and I thought after bishop b7 that I wasn't sure I was getting something the best, and the computer is not sure whether e5 is the best move or not. Right now it is, now it's not, now it is, now it's not. Now he's saying I should play either a3, g4, or e5, all with about a half a pawn advantage. Now my move, bishop d3, has jumped up to number 3. Bishop d3 says white has a very slight advantage here. Bishop b7. And now I was debating playing rook he1 or g4. I settled on rook he1. Computer says the game is even. Black plays queen b6. So for a long time here I looked at knight to d5 and I couldn't make it work. So let's see what I did wrong. I looked at knight d5 and I said, what happens if he just takes here and I didn't see what I could do here. I looked at e takes d5 check and I thought it was bad, and the computer says I can play knight to c6. That's a move I didn't look at. And now if he plays d takes e4, his best move, I can play bishop takes e4. He's forced to play knight c5. I can play bishop takes f6. Human's never going to find this, of course. G takes f6. And I have lots of moves that equalize. Bishop d5 check. King d7 forced. Queen h5 with equality. Well, I wouldn't have found this in a million years. All right, so back to the game. So I couldn't make knight d5 work. And the computer now thinks after knight d5, e d5. When he looks deeper, he realizes it's not as good as he thought. Notice I got that by forcing it down the line. If I just left it here in this position, at first it thought knight d5 was the best. Now it says maybe bishop f6. So I played knight b3. The computer laughs at that and says, ha, black's at least equal now. Maybe he should play b4 or h6 or rook c8 or something. He plays rook c8. And the computer says, my move, king to b1, getting my king out of the line, is a really nice idea. There we go. Best move. Way to go, Dan. All right. So king to b1. And here it says the game is about even. It says if black plays h6, I should play bishop takes f6. Knight takes f6, f5. I'll play that on the board. Bishop take, say h6. Bishop takes, knight takes. And now he's not sure what I should do. He says I've got equality on lots of moves. All right. So he plays bishop e7. And the computer says my best move is queen to g3, which I looked at, but I couldn't quite see why it was so good. And again, as he looks deeper and deeper, he thinks black's okay. And look at this interesting line. After queen to g3, he thinks black's best move is to sack the exchange, to remove a guard on e4, and when white takes with the pawn, maybe play something like e5, fixing my pawn on e4, and white has no advantage here. This is a stock sacrifice here to open up my king, mess up my pawns, all at the cost of an exchange, which is about 1 3/4 pawns, and the computer says he gets it all back. All right, so back to the game. So in the game, I couldn't make queen g3 work. So I played g4, and the computer says That doesn't work. If black plays b4, then black is better. And Stockfish was playing, sorry, I call it Stockfish. Beth O was playing a pretty good game here. By the way, Beth O got its name because Howard Stern was playing on the ICC and he wanted to play some more slow computers, and there weren't a lot in the certain range. So the ICC had their programmers create a couple more mid-level engines for him, and one they called Hey Now, because that's one of the pet terms in the Howard Stern show. And Beth O stands for Beth Ostrowski, and that's his second wife's maiden name. So they named this computer after Howard Stern's second wife here. Okay, so black plays h6. And now the computer says I have to play queen h3, which is a move I was aware of, but I really didn't look strongly of during the game. And now it's starting to say, maybe bishop h4 is just as good. No, now it says queen h3 is a little better, but it's only at 22 ply. But those are the only two moves: queen h3, bishop h4. My third move I looked at, bishop takes f6, I didn't like because of bishop takes f6. And the computer says I was right. After bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6 was what I was worried about. And now I got a problem. If I move this knight to e2, he starts these pawns down with a5, and black's way better. So my intuition there was good. I didn't really want to take that knight. So I played, and normally you do take the knight, but here I didn't think it was right with my knight on b3. So I played bishop h4, and the computer says black's still a little better if he plays b4 now. So he plays queen c7, which is kind of a Beth O-y kind of move. b4 would be more to the point. If he plays b4, if I try my knight d5 junk, computer says thanks for the knight. Pawn takes, it's not check. He moves out of the pin. And without this knight on d4 to go to f5 and create trouble, this kind of stack is just not working, which I was aware during the game. So my position is not nearly as dynamically potential as it would normally be. All right, so the computer says, Dan, you're hanging in there even with your 1500 opponent. Way to go. All right, so notice it says my rating is 1400. That's because it's my base rating. It's like I don't play. So, but it does give my FIDE title CM. All right, so here it says I should play bishop. Oh, sorry, it's his turn. So let's see what. So Stockfish plays Stockfish. Force of habit. Beth O plays queen to c7. Okay, so queen to c7. That's just kind of a waste of time, and that gives me a chance to get back in the game. Computer says bishop g3 is perfectly reasonable. I could play a3. Bishop g3. Way to go, Dan. You're finding some of the better moves here. Not as bad as it could be in this position. And it says black's only move to give him a slight advantage is to play b4, and then I have to play back knight e2. Well, there it is, b4. And it says, Dan, your only move is knight e2. Well, I figured that out. It didn't take very long on that move. I only took a minute and a half. I played knight e2. I looked at knight d5. I knew knight a4 was not really possible because of a move like bishop c6. And now it says he should play either g6 or d5. Says the game's about even. He plays knight c5. And the computer says my move, knight ed4, is good, and so is knight takes c5. I like knight ed4 better. All right, so that's what I did. It says he could either castle, he can play g6, he can play knight d3. Plays knight d3. And now it says my best recapture among my 3 recaptures is to take with the pawn. And it says I can take with the queen. Now, in the game, if you listed the game in the previous video, I thought queen d3 was not possible because of knight takes g4. Let's see why not. Queen d3. If knight takes g4, then e5. Excuse me. Ate lunch a few minutes ago and got a little stuff in my throat here. All right, so e5, and then castle, and then h3, trapping the knight. Wow. I didn't see any of that. All right. So, but the good news is my recapture pawn takes is the best move anyway. And it says black should get his pawns rolling. That's what he's got to do here. He's got to attack on the queen side. So a5 with play on both sides with equal play for both sides. Maybe a slight advantage to white, says Stockfish 10. All right, so he plays the terrible move, queen to d7. That's kind of anti-positional. He, he's not really going anywhere, and he's not really doing anything. So that's kind of just a wasted queen move. And you can see now for the first time the computer has jumped me up to like a 1.75 advantage if I play the right move, g5, which I didn't think was good. So let's look at why it is good. g5, I thought he would play h takes g5, I would play f takes g5, and then he would play something like knight h5. And the computer says I can play rook f1 and threaten queen takes f7 check. And he doesn't have any wonderful ways to save that. He can't play rook f8 or castle because of the knight. Let's say he moves the bishop back to f8. The computer says if he does that, I can play the thematic sack g6. F takes g6. And now something like queen to g4. He likes knight to a5 first. Bishop a8. Knight to c4. Well, this is well beyond my ken. All right, back to the game. All right, so I missed that, and I played h4, and the computer goes, no, Dan, he can play h5 if you do that, and he's back to equal again. And I wasn't too worried. I said in the video, if he plays h5 and I play g5 and he plays knight g4, I'm not too worried about that. But the computer says that's exactly what should happen for both sides, and the chances would be equal. Minus 0.02, now 0.00. So let's take a look at that. This is the logical play for both sides. h5, activating the rook and forcing me to do something while the knight is still good. g5, knight g4, thanks for the nice outpost square. And now it's looking at whether white should play f5 or knight a5. If f5 says he should play e5 or castle, and now he's leaning toward castle. All right, so let's castle. This is a much better castle than happened in the game. And now, in order for me to get an advantage, I have to find this idea knight a5 again. And if he saves the bishop with bishop a8, which is a terrible square for the bishop, I can play that obvious move, queen to e2, or knight to c4 again, with a pretty big advantage. All right, well, I'm not going to find that either. Back to the game. Okay, so he should have played h5. Instead, he plays d5, and I said, ooh, I'm not too afraid of that. If I play e5, I'm not trying to gain space, like in the French defense or something. I'm just trying to make that knight awkward. And the computer says, absolutely the right idea, and says that Betho has made a mistake. So e5, knight h7, so where's that knight going? That's the point. You know, a lot of times you could open up this g5 square and put it up there, but right now I've got that under lock and key with a pawn on h4. So I play f5. Computer says, best move, Dan, you understand this position. And he castles, and I went, whoa. And now the computer says I should play g5 anyway. Wow. I looked at that vaguely, but I thought he could just take. And if I take, I thought he could blockade on the dark squares, but he can't. Bishop takes g5, and now rook h1, threatening queen h5, and even if he plays bishop h6, he's in trouble. Well, I missed this, guys. Sorry, but yeah, I missed the g5 idea. Now, the way I played it was okay, but I missed this completely. G5 just doesn't look like the right idea here. It looks like I should be trying to get an f6. So I play queen e3, and the computer says, well, the good news, Dan, is you're still winning. The bad news is that wasn't one of your better moves. All right, so the computer takes the pawn, which is another bad move. And, of course, now I want to take back with the pawn because those two pawns on f5 and e5 are dominating the center and the king side. Computer says I'm up 3.7 here. He plays rook e8, and now I looked at e6 and I couldn't quite make it work. Let's look at it. e6, f takes e6. I thought this would let his bishop and his knight have squares here. Queen to d8, rook to g1. See, I thought he could defend now with like bishop f6. Bishop f6, obviously not. Bishop e5, the knight's holding the pawn. And the computer says this is a crush. Well, I saw stuff like this, but I didn't think it was that good. Oh well. All right, so I played rook g1, and the computer says, hey, Dan, that's your second best move. Way to go. All right, so I give myself high marks for this move. Play rook to g1. And now there's storm clouds all over his king. So he moves his queen completely away from the defense. Well, that can't be right. Now my attack is going to come in. So I started thinking, what happens if I start attacking h6? The computer says I can still play e6. I play queen f4. The computer says bishop f4 was better, but it still says this wins. And now I'm threatening f6, and it says he should play f6. It gives the line f6 and knight e6, queen back to defend, queen c6, knight db4, queen back to a4, bishop to f2, threatening queen takes h6, and it's kind of bye-bye here. I'm also threatening rook takes g7, and he can't stop all the threats. So it gives queen takes d1 check, hopeless. Okay, so instead he plays bishop to d8, and now the computer says just move your bishop out of the way and you win. I play f6. Computer says, yeah, that wins too, Dan. You're up 7 pawns. So he sacks a piece, knight f6, and the computer says ignore it. Move your bishop anyway. I didn't even look at that. I just said I take that knight, I win. So I took the knight, and the computer goes, oh, you're only up by 6 pawns. You could have been up by 10. Oh, well. So he takes back, and now I think I move the bishop to f2, and the computer goes, by far the best move. Wow. I get really good marks on that. It took me 3 minutes to find that move, bishop f2. And now I'm threatening queen takes f6 and queen takes h6. I've overprotected the knight on d4, and in some lines I'm going to play knight f5 followed by bishop d4. Which is going to be a monster. Notice how my blockading knight here is keeping this bishop out of the game. All right, so he plays king to f8, and I play the #1 move, knight f5. Way to go, Dan. Now the computer's getting a little desperate. It's 9.7 pawns for me. So he moves the queen back to b5. Computer says queen d6 check wins, knight takes g7 wins, bishop d4 wins. I played queen d6. It says he should put the rook in the way. He puts the bishop in the way. Computer says just take it off. You're up by 22 pawns. He takes with the rook. And now it says I should start sacrifice. This is where it's different than me and the computer. The computer is going to try to win most beautifully and doesn't care about the complications. I just want to trade everything off and win the end game. You know, I'm a human. I'm not looking to complicate when I'm killing him. I'm just looking to... you can win every game this way. My students love to complicate when they're winning, and then they throw it all away and they wonder, what did I do? And I go, I don't play that way when I'm winning. I don't look at rook takes g7 here. I didn't even look at it. I just said, let me play bishop c5, win more material, trade in the endgame, and I win. Bishop c5, he has to take with the rook. It says I should take with the knight. I said, who cares? I'll take with the queen. The computer says, oh, your lead's down to 6 pawns. And the answer is yes, but it's in an endgame with 6 pawns where I'm like winning trivially. Queen takes, so my lead has shrunk way, way down, but the ease of my win has gone up considerably. I know exactly how to win this game. All right, so offer the trade of rooks. He says, sure, I trade rooks. He goes there. I get the open file. Hits my knight. I guard it. He starts his pawns rolling. I said, let me bring my king over to your extra pawns. Let's block your king back in. King up. Those pawns aren't going anywhere. My king is a good blockader. He goes there. Now I thought, what's my best move? I played rook e5. The computer says I should play rook g7. I play there. He says, oh, your lead's only 8 pawns. a5. I said, sure, I'll just take the pawn. I'm getting ready to get a queen. hit the bishop again. The bishop has nowhere to go. He self-pins himself, but what else can he do? I bring my knight over to attack a pawn. He tries to guard it. I blockade the pawns with my king, and now he's almost completely out of moves. That's one of his few moves left. I simply guard my knight. He gives me a pawn. He sees that I'm already winning at 61 pawns. He gives me all his pawns. He goes back. I said, I'll just bring my king up, take your pawn, bring my king near your king, and you'll have to give me all your pieces. Okay, I'm not trying to calculate anything here. Now he's practically in Zugzwang. Computer says mate in a few. I took the pawn. He's in Zugzwang. He moves away from the bishop. I check. He goes up, and now this is a famous pattern mate. I just move my rook along the 8th rank. He's forced to move king a6 and rook a8 checkmate. Okay, so that's me going over the game that I just played. Apologize for the throat clearing, but as I said, I ate lunch and a little bit of food got caught on my throat. All right, so hopefully you found that interesting. That's how I go over a game. That's not a video on how to go over games but if you read in between the lines, it really is to some extent. You could see when I was forcing it down the lines, when I wasn't. I'll make the board the full size again. You know, we could make a whole video talking about the theory of what I did, but I think most people get the idea. And that's what I'm doing when I'm going over the game. I want to know, you know, what it thought about my moves, where I could have gone better, where if I analyzed something during the game in the previous video and I analyzed it wrong, where did I make my mistake, or I didn't analyze far enough, or I just completely missed the idea. Sometimes, as you saw, the computer came up with ideas that were way beyond the scope of what I could possibly have seen. And if I missed them, the answer is I wouldn't have gotten them in my prime, and I'm not going to get them now, and I'm not going to get them ever, and maybe no human would, because, you know, those are some computer lines, so I don't feel bad about those. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Third video of the day. I don't think I'll make 4. See you next time. Thanks for YouTube. Bye.